become increasingly more clear to me that the gaming industry is scared right now, and specifically of two big games that have disrupted the industry in ways that have been unforeseen for a lot of the companies that are in control right now. And of course, I'm talking about Black Myth Wukong, one of the biggest games of the year, selling over 20 million copies, has come out of nowhere and redefined what is a classic game for the modern day gamer. And of course, besides that, we have Stellar Blade that is bringing back that old school look and feel of games from long days gone by, and we're getting that feeling back again with a game that is magnificent in its overall look and appeal to the gamers. And these two games are scaring the games journalists, the consultancy firms, and the developer teams that have built their company on making the antithesis of both of these games. And I think Black Myth Wukong especially is disrupting the industry so much because it's pulling away the power from the Western games development sphere and bringing it solidly into the Eastern games development sphere with Japan, where you have development teams that are out of the sphere of influence of Western money. And this is what we're seeing with Black Myth Wukong, where it ignores the pleas of consultancy firms to add their DEI consultancy to change and affect the game, and it just does what it wants on its own without ideological influence towards their overall product. And this is what's scaring the gaming journalists, this is what's scaring the consultancy firm, and this is what's scaring the developers right now, because they have built their companies surrounded around the concept of making things focused on political progressive ideologies that are just not in line with the modern day gamer, especially since the modern day gamer just wants to play a good game, and that is just not the focus of these developers nowadays. They just want to make something that holds their philosophy and don't care about the product afterwards. And that's what we're seeing with a lot of the games that are coming out nowadays, where they just don't have the feeling or even the pretense of making a game for the gamers. But with Stellar Blade, with Black Myth Wukong, you get the purest form of what game players want. They have something that has a heavy foundation in making a game appealing to gamers, where you have difficulty settings, where you have levels of designs that are just wholly interesting to the people that love games for just being there for fun and overall practicality of having enjoyment when you're lost in another world. And I think that's what Black Myth Wukong is doing. It's introducing a new culture that is not steeped in Western ideology, and I think that's what gamers want from games. They want to be taken out of their world, and I think this is what Black Myth Wukong succeeds at. I think this is what Japanese games used to succeed at, and some still do, but they're getting more and more influenced by Western design patterns, and this is why people are rebelling against some of the new Japanese games that are coming out of Square Enix that are heavily influenced by the Westernized philosophies. And Black Myth Wukong doesn't have that, and it's definitely appealing to the masses, selling over 20 million copies. This is more than Assassin's Creed Valhalla sold over 2 years, where it barely reached 20 million after over 2.5 years. And you can see the difference with Black Myth Wukong, 20 million within a month. Of course, this has a large market in China, but that large market is the influence that is going to change Sony and a lot of these other gaming developers, because to appeal to that audience, you can't bring that Westernized philosophy, you can't bring those Westernized ideals. You have to make something that is heavily focused on that market. And I think this is going to do something that we saw similarly in the movie industry. When China became a big market, they started making things oriented towards China. I think we can see that happening in the gaming industry. At least the rumblings are going to grow, where a lot of these games developers are going to look towards China and go, what do they want? And what they want is nothing that we develop in the United States anymore, or Europe. They make things for gamers, and I think that's the thing that's going to sell right now, where games like Stellar Blade, games like Black Myth Wukong will sell out in China and be highly popular once they're released there. Of course, Stellar Blade is still PS5 exclusive, but once it gets its PC released, we have to look at the numbers closely, because China is going to be buying up this game. And if this game is successful in China, it's over for the Westernized style of gaming, where you have to actually make something appealing to the market now. And I think this is what's scaring game developers, journalists, and definitely consultancy firms that built their entire economy on bullying Western devs to believe this false sense of hope of attracting this diverse audience that really doesn't like your games at all. But they were tricked into this belief system, and they failed, and they produced failed content after failed content, and now they're seeing successful content out there dominate the industry. And I think that's the case with Black Myth Wukong and Stellar Blade. They're dominating the industry, at least the talk. And of course, this is leading towards a backlash within the industry itself, where you have IGN putting out a Game of the Year award, and they're trying to limit the overall votes for Black Myth Wukong, and it was done live and in the face of the audience that was voting, so they were caught red-handed trying to manipulate the results. And I think this is a hint that IGN, which is steeped with these consultancy firms, a lot of the people that work for these consultancy firms are former journalists, former game devs that just leave their company, and they still have contacts with people in their old company, and they redirect the messaging of games based on the money that is being received by these consultancy firms. You can just look at Sweet Baby Inc. that allegedly tried to bully Game Science, a developer of Black Myth Wukong, asking for over $7 million in fees, or else they'll put out messaging through game journalists that your game is sexist, racist, bigoted, and homophobic. And that's exactly what they allegedly did after Game Science rejected their offer. And you can see the headlines for the past 7 months against Black Myth Wukong and Game Science, the developer, coming out from IGN, The Gamer, Kotaku, attacking this game consistently, even up towards after its success of selling over 10 million copies. They were still attacking the game, saying, oh, it's just Chinese people buying the game, as if Chinese people aren't real people in their eyes, when they actually are the customer base. And I think that is a flaw with game devs and journalists today. They don't see the gamers as people. They see the gamers as someone that need to be educated and put in the right direction with the right philosophy that we only can get from them. And that is the arrogant and pretentious attitude that we're getting from people that are supposed to be working towards getting our money, and they're supposed to do that through respect and understanding what we want. And that is not the case anymore in the gaming industry, where they attacked a game that had 3 lead female developers that were working on it, calling it sexist, when a lot of the people working on the game are women too. So it's a weird situation that you could easily look into, but it's not about the truth for them. It's about manipulating these game companies into following their cultural standards, and they probably wanted to inject their own cultural standards in Game Science and Black Myth Wukong. And luckily for us, Game Science didn't need to care about them. And I think that not needing to care about the consultancy firms or westernized ideology is scaring a lot of the industry nowadays, where we have people frightened by other game successes and they're frightened by their own failures. You can look at Black Myth Wukong, still after a month consistently getting over 336,000 people playing the game at its peak hours, sometimes over 450,000 people. This is after a month, and this is showing that single player games are still alive, and good single player games are highly successful for a company. This game made $1 billion for a small developer that probably cost only $30 to $40 million to produce this game. They made their profit back, and they're probably going to expand and make even more games, and the competition is going to get even tighter for developers here in the United States that are still producing terrible content that is just not liked by anyone. We saw what happened with Concord, a massive failure for Sony, losing them over $400 million. We saw what happened with Kill the Justice League, that is still trotting out DLCs for 200 people to play. It's an absolute failure, but these companies are still sticking to this ideology because they're hoping some success comes from it, or they just don't want to have that embarrassment that their philosophy has failed them. It's the same thing with Skull and Bones, supposed to be a quadruple A game, barely reaches 500 people at its peak and consistently around 200, 300 people. This is a failure of a game that costs over $300 million to produce and is sinking Ubisoft towards bankruptcy. So you have this massive amount of failures that you can't make excuses for. You want to say it's the economy, but we just saw Stellar Blade make $100 million, and we just saw Black Myth Wukong make $1 billion. It's not the economy, it's you. And that is shoving away any excuses these games companies, these journalists can make up to the executives and the shareholders of the companies that are overseeing these corporations that are producing this content, where they can't use that excuse. They can just look at Black Myth Wukong and said, that made $1 billion, that sold 20 million copies. People obviously have money. Even if you want to look at Western games, you can just look at Space Marine. That sold a large amount. That is highly successful. There are games that are successful, but the games that are successful are made for gamers, and that is not simply happening in the gaming industry for the majority of these companies, and they're gonna have to answer for it. And there are no more excuses because of Black Myth Wukong, because of Stellar Blade. You can't say that lie that the gaming industry is just having a bad economic time when there are massive successes all around you. And I think that excuse is gone, and that excuse is scaring them even more than anything. But you tell me what you think about the situation. What do you think about Black Myth Wukong, Stellar Blade, the boogeyman of the industry? I think it's an amazing site. I love these games, and I'm happy to see them change the industry ever so slightly. But you tell me what you think about the situation. I like to hear your comments. Like, comment, share, subscribe. This is Wagner Knows Why. Catch you next time.